Hello and welcome to the Third Option International live chat series. We are recording tonight. Unfortunately, we can't do it live, but this will be posted on Sunday evening at 7. Sue and Randy Pinto here along with Mike and Andrea Buckley, and we are at topic 14. Look at us. We made it to the end. Woo-hoo. Topic 14 is rebuilding trust. However, we want to go back and talk about the process of forgiveness, which is the topic right before this. And we learned that, forgiveness is not a single act. It is not just that phrase, I apologize. It's a process. So Mike and Andrea, if you could just do a quick review, tell us about that forgiveness process again quickly, and then bring us right into our last topic here of how to rebuild trust.
Okay, thanks, Randy and Sue. As Sue just mentioned, it is a process. So it's something that we really have to take seriously to try to see which side of the table we're on when it comes to the forgiveness process. The first thing we need to do is resume respectful treatment. So when people are hurt, sometimes people are upset, they're mad. Unfortunately, sometimes people get physical, but we need to get back to respectful treatment. And then next, there's the give and take of honest communication. Beginning the speaking and the listening, very important, especially the listening side of things. And then when there's the wrongdoer, they have work to do, and their work is to apologize, but to apologize with a plan. To say, here, this is what I'm going to do to make this right. And then you go back and forth with that other person so that you can try to figure out a plan as to how you can bring things to where they need to be. The next thing is the repair process. And that means what might help? What are the things that I could do or you could do in order to get things right again? And then we go over to the injured party. They have to grieve first. It takes a long time, especially when there's been infidelity. It's not going to happen quickly. As much as that inflictor wants to have it done and over with quickly, that other person needs time to grieve. And from there, at some point, that wronged or injured party needs to let go when they're ready. It might not be quick. It might take weeks. It might take months. But they need to let go in order for them to heal even themselves. And then at the end of that give and take, that discussion needs to happen many times where true reconciliation takes place. So again, we could spend 35, 40 minutes like we did for the last session, but we need to go forward and talk about rebuilding trust.
Yes, so that's the last of the topics, rebuilding trust. Again, we're going to use the same word, a process. And it's really the final step of the forgiveness. The reconciliation and forgiveness now is the rebuilding of the trust. Forgiving is one thing. We can all go back through our mental scorekeeping of problems and blame and circles of spiraling of hurt cycle, and we forgive, but we don't forget. So it's important that we acknowledge we've been hurt. We know let down, betrayed, these are feelings. They're common to all marriages. And just because we've reconciled doesn't mean we're, okay, all safe now. We're never going to be hurt again. So it's normal for us to be a little gun shy. But again, this process begins with the same two parties. We've got the injured person and we've got the wrongdoer. Injured person's been hurt and the wrongdoer's done something wrong. And we switch roles on that. I don't know about you, but it's not always the same person.
Right.
So here's where we start. This injured person, if it's me, this is what I need to think about. Am I open? That's all we're asking in this process to start. Be open to the process that I can begin to trust someone. And for the wrongdoer, if I'm the wrongdoer, I have to ask myself the question, can I become trustworthy? How can I overcome this, whatever it is that was my weakness, and how can I restore myself and become trustworthy in the eyes of my spouse. So it's very important. It's not an automatic step. It's something that has to be earned, especially after the trust has been lost. There's fear involved on both parties. I think you can understand the injured person's afraid they're going to get hurt again. So they got to open up a little. We want to say, we're not saying trust immediately, but just be open. So that's the part they have to do. The final decision, the brunt of the work has to be the person who has messed up. They've got to take these steps now. It's not an automatic, okay, done and over with. It's this small step of, okay, I'm open. Let's see where it goes. So you probably have a chart about this ladder of trust. I don't know if you have the ladder, if you want to put up.
Sure. Yeah, I have the balance line. Yeah, I have the balance line first, where we have on one side, you can be too trusting or too distrustful. That's the balance line that we show right now.
Okay.
That's right. And then the actual third option that goes into the middle is testing.
Yes.
And we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. But we want to get into this ladder of trust. And I don't know if you have.
Yep.
Yeah, there it is. There's the ladder of trust. That's probably where we'd like to go next in describing trust itself. So one of the things that we might want to take a look at when it comes to trust is the actual definition of trust. Okay.
Okay.
And I know when we're usually live with people, we ask them, well, what do you think trust means? And there's a lot of different answers that come into that. But really, the definition that we use at Third Option is feeling safe, where we're physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually feeling that we can count on our partner, and it means feeling safe. So there are different levels of trust, and that's why there is that ladder. So if we look at the levels of trust, the first level, and we're going to talk in general about trust with other people too, besides our spouses. How do I act around certain people when we're looking to define trust? So we're at the bottom rung of a ladder, and usually it's an acquaintance, somebody that we just met, someone we might know slightly. And in that relationship, what do we really need from them in order to go forward into a deeper level of trust? And generally that's going to be respect, okay? That's the first session of the third option. So that is normal that that's what we would need. And then when we look at that relationship, we just want to know, how can we really trust them? Where do we go at the second rung of the ladder, where we're going to feel maybe a little bit stronger being around them? What is the need there that we need? Sometimes we're going to need honesty. If these people aren't going to say, I'm going to be next week, at the firehouse for a meeting, if they don't show up, how are we going to have that level of trust? So honesty is very important in that situation. And then next, as we get more involved and maybe more relaxed around people in the third stage of the ladder, we're trying to climb a little bit higher. What do we need to go up? I mean, we need reliability, we need dependability. If we get that, we're going to head up that ladder even a little bit further. Next, as we go up to like the fourth rung, we are starting to act around people like very good friends. Those are the ones that we do have a higher level of trust with. And we might share a little bit of our personal information with them. So from a good friend, to continue that relationship, if we tell them something, we need confidentiality. That's important to go forward. And then we finally come to the top of the ladder. And the goal there is intimacy. We can really then, especially in a spousal relationship, really talk about just about anything that we dream of, anything that bothers us, and feel comfortable doing that. And the word intimacy sometimes is broken down to the word into me see, where you can see each other and you strip away all those layers that we sometimes have with people that we don't know or trust that well. So there's love, there's acceptance. And how can we have a deep relationship with someone that cannot accept us, or someone who's here today but gone tomorrow? So our marriages, we want to work on to really work with our best friends, but it takes all of those previous steps on that ladder to get to that high level through respect, honesty, reliability, and keeping confidences.
Yeah, that ladder of trust is interesting, and it takes a while for me to wrap my head around sometimes when I look at it. So I got to remind myself, the top of the ladder is home safe. That's where we've got all the trust, and where we feel safe. The bottom of the ladder is stranger and on guard. And it brings to mind something we talked about in some other conflict resolution we've done, Mike. And I look this way, it's like a bullseye, right? There's concentric circles of relationships, and it's kind of inverse. In other words, the people at the center of the bullseye, the most important relationships, your spouse, your family, your friends, and so on. The people the closest, we treat the worst, and treat people the furthest out, we treat the best. So perfect strangers, we're very polite to and respectful, and it goes back to, as you've said to many times, when you first start dating, how do we treat people? And how do we get away from that, right? So it's interesting, this ladder reminds me of that and those behaviors, and what our goal is, right? Where we want to get and how we get there.
Yeah, and I agree with Randy. And what I like, I have to say what I like is, I know sometimes when you look at the ladder of trust, I remember, I think the first time I saw it years ago, but then when I looked at it again recently this week to just kind of refresh my memory on it, and I thought, okay, wait a minute, what does this mean? And I think it's so important to have it written down, because I think often if we're just talking about it, and I say this with my kids a lot, it's just kind of out in the ether. It's just this abstract sort of concept, but it's written down. It helps us to really think, oh yeah, when I just meet somebody, I'm, polite, but I'm not going to suddenly say, oh, hey, this is what's going on in my life. So we're on guard. So when I see it on paper, I can really put it into my own experience and into my own life. So I love that the program has these charts and these examples to really bring it out to us and explain it step by step.
And when you do run into a person, when you see it laid out this way, it's logical, it makes sense. Once I can wrap my head around it, like, yep, it makes perfect sense. But also realize, if you're out and about in life and you run into somebody and they're behaving at the wrong step of the ladder for the relationship, right? So if somebody does walk up, you just met them, they're telling you intimate details about you, that's not appropriate, and it really stands out. And I think this illustrates it nicely, right? So it's interesting.
That's right.
Yes, and I think it's important to think about this as not being any guarantee. There's an element of risk involved here, and it involves being open. It involves taking a chance. It involves managing the risk wisely. Can go one way or the other, and a lot of it is preconceived experiences that have influenced us, things that didn't work out in relationships, times where you trusted too easily. So we've got that to, when you're on that balance line, some of us have been over there, and then some of us have been on the opposite. So the real answer becomes the third option in the middle, which the risk is we're going to test. We have to test to climb the ladder.
That's right. And it brings me back. Andrea doesn't like me to use these examples, but I love them. The old Charles Schulz Peanuts cartoons, where Charlie Brown's going to kick a field goal and Lucy has to hold the ball. Well, Charlie comes running up to the ball, and then Lucy pulls the ball away. He kicks it, goes up in the air, and falls right on his rear end. And he's risking that she's going to do her part, and she doesn't do her part. And it's just kind of a way of explaining that's what happens when trust is broken, in a in a funny setting, I should say.
Well, and back to what you started out with, this is a process. And I try to remind myself that, I don't know about you, but everything I try in my life doesn't work necessarily the first time I try it, right? Everything isn't perfect. So it's an experience, you learn, you get better at it. So we had some feedback from a couple of things we put out, and some feedback from some people. I tried this twice and it didn't work. Everything doesn't work the first time. It might take a few times, a learning process, and there's a lot of moving parts, to put it simply, right? So to your point, Andrea, yeah, no guarantee, right?
No guarantee. And yeah, we've talked about it many times that, I might be ready to move into this ladder of trust, or ready to move into a certain phase or a certain lesson and practice something, and he totally might not be. So that's where there's that, you have to kind of stand on that line of reconciliation, stand there and wait for your partner to cycle around till they're where you're at, and you can then hopefully move forward together. But because we're constantly kind of opposite of each other on that line. So if I'm at the line, I might have to wait a little bit before Randy's ready at that line. So yeah, this process, any of these processes, this isn't just, oh, we made it through the 14 topics. Guess what? We're all good. We're going to falter, and we're going to have to go back to topic 5 and be like, oh, what do we have to do again? Why isn't this working out? And
True.
yeah, none of it's guarantees. And
now that we're at the last topic in the series, we remind ourselves that we're just highlighting each of these subjects, right? And really, the video that we have available for people is one tool, but the best tool is in a community with a group with people and interacting. And I remember the first time we went through this, after we went through the whole thing, I didn't think, okay, we're done, we're good. I thought, yeah, that probably wasn't enough. So we've been through the session a number of times, right? Because you can learn a little more each time, and things I didn't understand the last time through, then now I was in a position to have things connect. So that's the nature of a process. Not always going to work at the same time the first time. So just encouragement to people that you try something, it didn't work. That's not necessarily a problem yet, right?
True.
Right. And it's almost like really the time period that we dated was really a time of testing. Most people don't. There might be a few out there. First date, I love you, we're going to get married. I mean, that's kind of, I suppose it happens once in a blue moon, but it's a time of testing. You go up that ladder, you start out with this conversation. I don't know how much I can trust him. I don't know how much I can trust her. It's kind of a romantic notion. Maybe it's this love at first sight, but it isn't. Dating's a time of testing. That's how the trust builds, slowly and gradually. But we also need to look at that ladder for a moment and say to ourselves, what happens when you have a huge issue where trust is broken? And you're at the top in the relationship. You're in this intimate relationship, and there's a real breach of trust. Well, we like to say that on the bottom of this ladder of trust, there's a basement. And you can go from the top of this list, being intimate with your spouse, and all of a sudden, it's not like the board game Sorry, where you go around and, you pass whatever, and then you can, okay, I'm good again. No, you're down here in the basement, and you have to start all over again. So again, we talk about degrees. We talked about that in forgiveness. Well, we need to apply that also here with trust. People have to understand in relationships, when it's seriously broken, you have to start over. And it is the process. And you can achieve reconciliation, right? But you have to use that process, and you have to be fair to one another and work it up slowly.
When trust is broken, we call that mistrust. The person that's broken that has to earn their way back up that ladder. And that sometimes they don't really want to have to do that. I want to go from the bottom to the top and skip some rungs. But that other person that has been hurt seriously needs to see that person earn their way back up. And they just have to work through that process in order to do that.
Right. One example, I think that's a good example of that, and like forgiveness, it's the same principle. If we rush to do the work too quickly, easily, patch it up, and we're setting ourselves up for a bigger hurt and maybe another. It's the kind of test where you have to know, I'm going to trust a little bit and see if that works. And if it works, I'm going to trust a little bit more. If it doesn't, I might pull back. It's that kind of thing you would do. One example might be, say you had a spouse who was a gambler and they went to the casino and they gambled everything and they put your house up for sale. Well, that's a big breach in trust if you knew nothing about it. I think most people would see that climbing that ladder back, the process of forgiveness first, but then working, okay, I'm going to forgive this person. I'm stay with them. I said for better, for worse. How am I going to trust them again? I still have to know, I have to go online and I have to look at my accounts. I have to go and I have to check my checkbook. I have to go to the mail and I have to look at the mail. And if I can see a pattern where the person's being trustworthy and they're being truthful, I can go to the next level. I think we can all see with that example, it could take a year, maybe, or two, maybe to get back to the top of the ladder where you feel safe. And I think that's our definition here that we're judging by. We want to feel safe. That's our goal. And we can through this process.
When we are looking at trust and intimacy, sometimes it's difficult for people to go through this process because maybe their parents were alcoholics or had addictions of some sort, or maybe their parents died when they were young. And boy, they have real issues with trying to trust someone that they don't even know. And so it's hard when they carry that on to their relationship when they decide to get married. So there's a lot of difficult things that happen in people's lives that, sometimes we call that the childhood emotional baggage, which we covered a few sessions ago. But the whole concept of trust is that it is risk. And sometimes people really have difficulty taking the risk to trust that person, to bring them to that high level on that ladder, because it's new ground for them. And they really have to work hard at making that happen.
And that's where I like my old saying, I think I said it once before, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Mm-hmm. But what choice do we have? We have to take the risk to be open that something's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that is a good point. I was thinking the same thing with what you said at the very beginning of the lesson is you have to be open. You have to be open to doing this process and open to moving up this ladder. So, and I really liked I thought the gambling metaphor was actually great, or that anecdote about that gambling. I thought it really put it well in learning about and how the process can work. So, I think that we can probably take a look quickly, although I think we've covered quite a few of the, summaries and takeaways of this particular lesson. But just to reiterate, we'll take a look at that and talk about that there's many levels of trust. And the big thing is it takes time to build back up, especially for those really larger breaks of trust. It can take not just days or weeks or months, it might take a year, maybe a few years. But if you're open and willing and you care about the relationship and you care about working to keep the family together, it can work. And rebuilding takes this one I liked, Mike and Andrea. I really liked this one. This one I thought really hit me yesterday when I was making up the slides. Rebuilding, earning the trust takes a while, but rebuilding the trust takes even longer.
That's right. It does.
That's really something I think to remember is that, once you've lost the trust, to try to get it back, that can take a lot longer than the first time. Because the first time, when you first start dating or first get married, you want to trust. You're ready to trust. You're ready to take those risks, But then when that trust is gone, now it's going to be harder to rebuild it back up. I found that one powerful.
Yes, and that works on both sides. I think sometimes we might identify if we're the injured party with what you just said. Like, I don't know, rebuilding that trust. But I think it's just as devastating for maybe the person who's had a lapse in judgment. You know, maybe they were unfaithful, but it's been a bad, awful experience for them now to not be trusted by that other person. So it's just as hard for them, right, to forgive themselves and and start that rebuilding process.
You know, it's interesting you said that, because there was an incident that happened to someone within our community here, and I'm not going to talk about what it is, but I remember thinking, boy, you know, there's not just a tragedy on one side. There's actually a tragedy. There's actually people, I should say, on both sides of that tragedy. And actually, this is, you're right, when you just said that, this is the same kind of thing. You know, we think about rebuilding trust, meaning the injured party has to trust that wrongdoer, and how difficult of a process that can be. However, to go on to the other side of that tragedy, that person who lost the trust, that's a long, hard, arduous process for them to know that they lost that trust. So I'm glad you brought that up. And again, I think it goes back to what you said. I believe it was our last topic where you said everybody's worthy of forgiveness. So it's not always just one side of the tragedy. It's just not that the injured party side. There's also another party on the other side of that tragedy that's just as important and has a lot to go through as well. So
yes, and I also want to say at this juncture too, all these topics connect, as we've said before, and this is where you see them really coming to fruition at the end of the series. But the communication that we stress over and over in the listening and in the speaking topics, as always, they're the important element in building and maintaining the trust and the intimacy, because it's important that we understand each other so we don't misunderstand. We don't have the misunderstandings get taken for something else. We don't speak the same language, and you probably don't either. And if we don't realize this, we think we are agreeing to things that we're really not. And then we have broken promises. This is a big one. Perceived lies. They might not really be lies, but we're perceiving them as lies. And now we actually have miscommunication. And again, that's why it's so important that we have to learn to speak I statements, say ouch when we feel hurt and we feel we've been violated, and then we have to begin talking it out, and then we end up trying to rebuild the trust. So in this topic, we see how it all works together, all these little building blocks that we gained insight along the way.
right. And actually that communication you were talking about really brings us nicely into, we have to be able to communicate with ourselves, and thinking about those questions that we have to ask ourselves. So if we think about questions to ponder, you know, we have to start with ourselves, and what should we ask ourselves and consider from ourselves. And, you know, am I a trustworthy person, or am I honest? And all of these things we have to think about in terms of our own self, and communicate with ourselves and really understand and consider those. And then going into our questions in relation to our spouse, you know, at what level of trust am I right now with my spouse? Do I generally trust him or her too much or too little? So again, there's those questions that need to be considered throughout the week. So Mike and Andrew, is there any one of those questions for either self or spouse that interests you the most, or that you find is more of a challenge for some, before we go into our final thoughts?
I just, you know, I could look at all of them and make a case for any of these here. Sometimes being too mistrustful doesn't give that other spouse a chance, but sometimes they have a reason for being mistrustful. So circumstances can dictate a lot of different answers to these questions. However, as a personal thought that I want to make at this point is that when we're dealing with the subject of affairs or separations, sometimes we want to reconcile so badly that the person that's been violated wants to make amends before the process has been tested. We really need to have that testing be that third option. And when we do that, there's going to be a roller coaster ride afterwards if we're not really healed, and that other person does that cheating or that other relationship again. And then we're really going to have a problem if we don't take our time to go through the testing process properly. And again, it can take time. There's no rush to fix this. This is not how it works.
Yeah, interesting. Everything takes time. It all takes time and patience on both people, and that's really just what it is. But follow the process, be true to the process, and you do your best to work through it. Some final thoughts. Again, we say this at the end of each week. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear any comments, what's worked for you, what you think of the program. If you'd like to see the program in your area, how can you find out how to get it in your area? Email us, contact us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. Go to our webpage, and if you want to stream or order the DVD so that you can see these 14 topics in the DVD formation, along with using these videos to help your relationship, help it improve. Or if you would like to see a community, a TTO community, third option community in your area, you can try and contact a local church, pastor, community organizations, and tell them about this program. Say, we really feel this would be a wonderful addition to our community for hurting couples. It will help the family. It will help us. It'll help our family. It helps the whole community. And we would love to, give you information about how you can get the program in your area. So Mike and Andrea, we are done. 14 topics. Not that everything's perfect, right? But which is again a lesson is that these topics are here. It's continuous. It's a continuous cycle. Continually can go back and relearn, rewatch, keep working on it. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
I would like to just say that, as with all the topics that we've covered in the past, that when people break down trying to go through all of these different processes, if they feel overwhelmed and they just can't make any progress in these areas, that going to a counselor or a clergy person for help is something that we advocate very strongly, because we think it can help people.
And I think my takeaway would be to any listeners or people that view this live chat, whether they're viewing it live or they watch it whenever they watch it, is that even if it's very important, when one spouse decides to make the decision to look at their marriage and their self-reflection, as you said, every week in these questions, if they do the work, even if they're coming alone or watching it alone, their marriage will change, because they're part of it. What they're contributing to it is they're going to start to build it up. And so, our hope, we've seen a lot of couples come together. We've seen couples come separately. It's very hard. We don't judge, and sometimes they leave and they don't share. We don't know what they've taken away. Other times people tell us, and it's remarkable that it only takes that one spouse. We had a couple coming, or no, the couple didn't. The wife came. She drove an hour one way and an hour home, and she had children home. And after, she said very little, and after about 4 months, she said, I said, gee, is this, how's everything going? I just approached her. She says, I came because I thought that my husband needed to change some things in our marriage. And I went home, and little by little, every session she went home, he was waiting for her to bring home the worksheet and the questions. He never came because he had to stay and watch the kids, and it was an hour away. And she said, this has done wonders for our relationship. And she was so quiet, just her coming and her doing it. He was waiting to do the work when she got there. So we have a lot of hope. We've seen this help a lot of people, including ourselves. And the last point I would say, we've gone through these sessions, as you have, several times, us probably more than you. But we are at a different juncture in our life now, married 49 years. We have a whole different outlook on life, retirement, children, grandchildren. These skills we still have to apply We're not the 25 years ago couple, Mike and Andrea. We're this couple today, and these tools are relevant to us today. So it's where you are in your life, the principles hit you. They're invaluable. You can use them forever.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a really great 14 weeks doing this. We really appreciate it. And to let our viewers know, we are going to be back at some point. We're taking a little break, but we will be coming back with some more chat series. I don't know that it'll be live. We're in the works, but we'll be back at some time. So please keep checking our Facebook page or Twitter handle or whatever, and YouTube. And we hope to see you all again soon. Mike and Andrea, thanks so much. And
Well, thanks to you for all the hard work you both have contributed. We appreciate and value your friendship, your relationship with each other, your beautiful family. So we're blessed to have gotten to know you.
Thank you. Thank you
Your
very much.
pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.